Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Attempt number 3 to record this podcast. Let's see how I do this time around. Welcome to episode number 42, I believe. And this one, I'm gonna cut the crap and get right to the point. This episode is gonna be goals wrap up. No. 2022 goals wrap up. No. Goals completion 2022. No, goals wrap up is probably better. We'll go with that one. We will talk about, for those of you that stuck with me for a year of like me giving you reminders, setting up goals. You know, back earlier in January, I uploaded a podcast where I talked about what I do to set goals, how I go about it, what I recommend doing, how I do things. And throughout the year, I went ahead and just gave you guys tips and tricks and reminders and how to approach things. And it was my way. By the way, that was episode 11, New Year, New Me. I was giving you tips on how I do things and how do I approach it and my approach to these things, because I find them incredibly useful. And if you've been with me for these 30 plus podcasts, you have heard me talk about that in intros and outros and reminding you and telling you how to reassess and regather yourself and replan so that you can continue to be successful, right? And here we are. We are now officially at the end of the year. I mean, I told you folks from the get-go that there is going to be a few weeks I would recommend that we finish out your goals and then enjoy the rest of your year before starting the new year. And I think that's it. If you've done what I've suggested in the last 12 months, give or take, probably more 11, we're done. This is it. Pat yourself on the fucking back. And no, I don't mean that sarcastically. I mean legitimately. If you did what I recommended for you to do, congrats. No joke. You should be incredibly proud of yourself. Because if you did, once again, what I told you to do throughout this year, whether or not you were successful in your goals, whether or not you did what you were supposed to, whether or not you achieved everything on your list, you did more than you would have done without planning anything. And that deserves appreciation and commensurates? No. You should be commended for it. The reason why I implemented this is because I find this incredibly useful. If I don't set goals, I don't achieve half the things I want to do in the year. You forget about them. You know, I've often, it's like a craving. You're like, oh, I want something salty, and then you get busy, and then you forget to eat. I don't know how often that happens to you guys, but my point is it comes and goes, and you need to be willing to adapt to the situation. And setting goals allows you to recenter yourself and remind yourself what those things are. So, for those folks that stuck around for me, all year long, I want to do a little quick wrap up. I want to talk about, first and foremost, once again, congratulating you for the effort put in. Once again, you have done more than you would have if you didn't practice these exercises. And so take a lot of pride in the fact that you did the work. But with that being said, I do feel like we need to go back in one last time to reassess your goals and reassess the things that you did so we can learn from it. If you don't learn from what you've done, what's the point in expecting a different outcome? You need to reassess so that way you can move forward. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through some of my goals. Why? For a number of different reasons. One, because I think that it's good to show you both the successes in this process, but also the failures. Because in the very beginning, if you remember listening to episode 11, I told you folks to pick goals that were difficult, achievable, but also not super easy to do. Something where you do need to work at it, something where you need to struggle. And the reason for that is if you do it, you would have done far more than you ever did, even if you did fail, right? So let's get into that a little bit, because I'll give you examples of how I did it, and we'll go from there. I won't go over all my goals with you folks because there's quite a few of them. And I'll be honest with you, I've achieved maybe 50% of them. Some of it is just because of life changes, as we talked about before. There's a lot of different things going on in my life right now. So as we talked about one of the previous episodes, you have to kind of adapt. Some things will have to get dropped off midway depending on what the card's life gives you. That happens. That's going to happen to everybody. So don't feel bad about that. So I'm going to go through my little goals here. I'm going to go through a few of them that I feel like, and I'm going to go through the successes relatively quickly because I hate patting myself on the back, especially publicly, which this is what this is. So one of the ones I do want to highlight though the most is I looked back on CuriousJohn, this podcast. I looked back in 2021, and one of the goals I set up for myself in the beginning of January was that I needed to put out far more content. The goal for this podcast was just content. I needed to be consistent, and I needed to be able to go and consistently make you, the viewer, listener, feel like there was going to be something every week. And that was my goal. And so originally when I was thinking, I would look back in 2021, and I was saddened to see that I only created 5 podcasts in 2021 for this podcast. That's sad. It's incredibly sad. I think this podcast was starting at 20 for reference. So the fact that I only did 5 podcasts was really a disappointing thing for me. So in trying to increase that number, I told myself, let's pick a solid number. I mean, 5, let's double it. 10, I should easily be able to do 10. I originally thought 20. I'm like, oof. 20 is going to be hard when I'm doing no interviews. If I can't get any interviews, 20 would be hard. But then I took a little perspective in mind, and I was thinking to myself, like, if I do 20, can I do more? And then ultimately, what ended up happening is I told myself, like, at 20, the perspective kicked in of it being less than 50%. If I'm shooting for 1 a week, right? 52 weeks in a year, you split that in half. I mean, that's 26, right? If my math is right, you're ultimately doing less than 2 a month. Wasn't good enough. So I shot for 32. And I'll be honest with everybody. Like at 32, I felt like that was a bit much. I didn't think I'd be able to do it. Not solo podcasts. It's far different. Any of you folks that listen to podcasts or even create podcasts, know that a solo podcast with your own individual thoughts and your own content and keeping it, succinct and clear and entertaining is incredibly difficult. So I knew 32 was going to be a challenge. But because, like I mentioned earlier in podcast 11, in the setup, in the preparation for these, I always told you folks, corner yourself a little bit. That technique's always worked for me. I like to corner myself into things a little bit because it adds a certain level of pressure, and I thrive in that, right? Some of you procrastinators are aware of that. And so I did that by choosing to do 32 episodes this year. And it is with great pleasure that if my math is correct, this is the 32nd episode this year. And in hindsight, a bit of me, gives me a little bit of a happiness and a pat in the back for feeling that, for doing it, right? But a little bit of me, because I have that little gene in me, what I call now the Michael Jordan gene, because I have that in me, it's like, I should have done 1 a week. No weeks off. No way around it. I should have done 1 a week. And so that might be the next year's goal. We'll see. So quickly brushing through some of my successes, at least things I felt like were successes. As far as my fitness goals, I did have a goal to drop about 10 pounds. I haven't weighed myself as of late, but I'm pretty much there. I started the year at about 205-ish. If I had to take a guess right now, I'm in the high 180s, probably low 190s. I mean, I'm there, and that's been done with the challenges I've had of work. What that means is that I've been working a lot more lately, so maintaining that throughout the holidays and maintaining that in a time where my schedule is so varying that it's hard to have consistent gym time. So that's a success. What else is another one on my list of success? One of the things I'll very quickly touch upon, because I don't want to get into this too much, is one of the things I felt like I needed to do was try to be a better friend. That's one thing that I thought that I could improve upon. And so some of you that are likely more in my inner circle, we'll talk about circles at some point in this podcast, I probably checked on you more. I probably asked how you were doing. I probably asked how your people were doing, how you're doing with stress or whatever the situation is, right? And maybe also look at it this way. I probably might have called you out for some shit you've done. And as much as that's uncomfortable, you would rather want somebody to call you out for some shit that you did than keep you in a situation where I'm just a yes person in your life and never helping you grow. That's what you should want out of a friend. So that's the most I'll get into that. We'll talk about that some other time, probably, maybe. Another success for those of you that follow my social media is I finished my kitchen. And for those that don't know, this was a 8 to 9 month project. I came in with very little woodworking skills. I would still consider myself to this day an amateur woodworker. And for me to take on a kitchen, which is something that I have no experience doing as an amateur woodworker, I had to learn a tremendous amount when it came to hinges and door construction and staining and finishing in place and creating whole new cabinetry, scribing, learning how to, I had to relocate piping and plumbing and install faucets. I mean, it was a tremendous endeavor. 8 months, basically, only when I had spare time on the weekends. And so it was an incredibly big job to take on myself, but it was done and I got it done. And I take tremendous satisfaction knowing that I did it, especially with where I was in my skill level. But those of you that have seen my kitchen know what it was and where it came from and what it came to be. If you don't know, follow me on Instagram, LifeGeneralist. And you'll see some pictures there. It's one of my project pictures. So very excited about that. But in without tooting my own horn, let's talk about some of my failures. Because there were some, but there's going to be. Because of the way I initially told you folks to plan this. So let's talk about some of my failures. One of my goals has, for probably a year or two now, 2 years for sure, was to take the burden of the fees associated with these podcasts and have them pay for themselves, whether that's through merch, whether that's through sponsorships, whether that's through whatever. And that's something I did very little to no work on, and I can't say with any sort of certainty or confidence that I did a good job on that. Terrible job on that. That's one of the things that I put on the biggest back burner because I'm not the guy that likes to ask folks to buy shit. I have a ton of woodworking stuff, and I'm working on this, so you'll see this on my social media now. I have a whole bunch of woodworking stuff I've made. It's all on my Etsy store. I don't promote my Etsy store. Things just went up, and I didn't say anything. And so eventually I'll have to start pushing it. So that'll likely be one of my goals now that I think about it. But because of that, I have 2 podcasts, Monday's Hangout, and I have this one. And it would have been great not to have to worry about any sort of fees associated with the hosting of it, as those are annual fees. So that's a complete failure. And let's be honest about that. There's no shame in that. It is what it is. Oh yeah, that's one of the things on my list. One of the things on my list is actually to promote any items I have for sale. So that was a big kind of failure. Once again, I need to work on that. That might be something I carry over, which we'll talk about soon. What else here? Trips. I was planning on taking a few trips. Post-COVID, it was nice to be able to take some vacations. I wanted to visit Splinter Cell. I wanted to visit Boskinator. There's a few people I wanted to kind of go out of my way to visit and see how they're doing. It's always good to just reconnect with people. But just haven't been able to. And right now with my work schedule, it made it even more difficult. But those are things that I'll remedy as soon as possible. Plus, they have their own things going on in life. And I don't feel the need to kind of infiltrate if I didn't need to. There's one I won't really get into because I think it's totally achievable if I make some moves in the next 2 weeks. I'm just making some big life decisions. But as far as fitness, I was far more consistent. I did feel like I did that successfully. Release movie. What does that mean? Oh, I can't even read my own handwriting. I did have a goal of relaxing more. I failed terribly in that. But some of the grinding I did in order to achieve some of this stuff, especially the kitchen, I mean, there's not a lot of time to relax. So that'll be something I'll think about for future goals. And that's the majority of my goals, to be honest with you. I mean, I didn't go too crazy because I did have so much going on, right? With 2 podcasts, I had a job I was focusing on. The kitchen was a tremendous, once again, 8-month project. I didn't want to overburden myself with goals. So those were basically my goals. And so, for the most part. And so ultimately, what do we get out of that? So what I would tell myself, and you have to do this for yourself to assess what you want to do moving forward. What I would tell myself in these scenarios is, how many of these goals am I still interested in? How many of these goals do I still care about improving or changing? And then you have to start making some decisions about adding them to a 2023 list. For some of you, this is going to sound daunting, taking on another year's worth of projects. And while I say yes, it's the work never ends, in my opinion, progression and improvement should never end. Stagnation leaves you nowhere. The world will leave you behind without stagnation. And you can't look at this as a burdensome situation. You need to look at this as an opportunity, right? There's always the half glass people, half empty, half full people, right? You got to decide what you are in life, because whether or not you want to put in this work, you have to realize that if you have the ability to do these things, that's an opportunity to improve. These are things that other people don't have. These are things that other people wish they could do. And so if you have it, why not do it, right? So don't look at it dauntingly. Look at it as an opportunity to improve. But back to my point. So how many of these do you want to do next year? So if I was going to look at my list, I would definitely add my trips, the things I didn't do this year. I would definitely continue to focus on promoting my items I have for sale, because there's no reason they should be sitting there. People should be enjoying them. But secondly, it's more about like finding a middle ground with my ego. We'll talk about ego death at some point. I need to start writing these things down as I say them, because then later on I look at this stuff and I'm like, I don't have topics to talk about. So I'm going to write that down now. I try to feel like I practice ego death to a certain degree. And some of that is not being this guy that's like, look at my stuff, look at how great this is, or look at how good this is, or buy my stuff. And I hate that. But part of being a creator and having these things is it'd be nice for people to enjoy them. But it's also not cost effective for me to eat the cost of all these things. So that's what these things essentially are. So anyways, I need to work on that. I need to work on, I'll continue to maintain the being a better friend. So I'll still continue to do that. That's basically, it's not that the intent to do that isn't there. It's more about taking the pause to do the things I need to do to follow up with people. I still need to focus on making these podcasts reliant. No, that's not the right word. Basically making it so that they're not financial burden on myself or on Ruben or whomever. Like, they need to be something where they stand alone. We've been doing this long enough where they should at some point at least pay for the hosting of the podcast. That's the way I would do this. I mean, all the others, the kitchen's done. I don't have to worry about that. The fitness stuff, I will continue to make more goals on. But what I would say is the next steps for you folks is doing what I just did with that list. Go through your goals, pat yourself on the back, be proud of the ones you completed. Don't look at the negative ones as like, oh, I didn't get to do it. Look at them as an opportunity to try to complete them the next year. But then also remind yourself that I told you to shoot high. So any sort of progress that you made with any of them is far more than you likely would have ever done on your own without a planning session. Be aware of that, and also take pride in that. And what I'll tell you, because I'm trying to keep these podcasts short, what I'll tell you is this. Go and enjoy your 2 weeks off. You have 2 weeks where you can enjoy the holidays, enjoy food, enjoy family, enjoy people, have fun. If you truly did what you were supposed to all year and you did what I recommended, it is time for you to enjoy yourself and truly just bask in some relaxation, be proud of what you've achieved, but then just have these things on the back of your mind. Not functionally always working on them, grinding them. No, just let them in the back of your mind. What I've realized as like an artistic person, which that sounds douchey saying, is that as I sometimes have a problem, a woodworking problem, for example, I'll keep it in the back of my mind, and sometimes my mind will work on autopilot. The subconscious piece of it will just work on it, and the problem will just come to me at some random point, as if something was downloading into a computer, and boom, it's done. Okay, you can work with this thing now, right? So I would suggest think these things through for the next few weeks, and then towards the beginning of the year, time to work again. Time to make a new list. And I suggest that you take the same advices from last year. You start thinking about the things you didn't complete 22 that you want to do for 23. You start setting your whole goals high again. And now knowing the things you know about yourself, this will be a good time because I'm not going to be reminding you in 2023. This is on you now. I've taught you my approach to things. This is on you. My suggestion to you is to be as proactive as possible in the very beginning to set yourself up for the best results. Right? I used the analogy of running a race last time. And if you're looking to run a race, you got to do everything that you can to give yourself the best heads up on that race. You don't just get up and just start running. No shoes, no socks, no stretching, no eating, no hydrating, no going to the bathroom, do you? No, you do all of those things in preparation for your race. You go to the bathroom, you make sure you have plenty or too little food in the stomach, whatever that balance is for you when you're exercising early. You put on your shoes, you stretch, you make sure you have the appropriate attire, that it's not going to chafe you or it's not too baggy or too heavy or whatever. You do every single thing that you can to be as successful as you can for your race. Nobody wants to start on a negative at the beginning of a race. So do what you need to do, whether those are calendar reminders for yourself, whether those are setting goals or timelines. At the beginning of the goal planning session, I recommended for you to sit there and look at your goals and break them down individually, what you need to do every month or every week or every 2-3 months to get where you need it to get at the end of the year. These are all skills that you can implement into those things. So I highly suggest that if you're looking to continue this, and if this was useful for you, feel free to go back to episode 11 and re-listen to those things that were beneficial for you. But I want to leave you guys with this. And I want to reiterate this because I'm terrible at this, but I don't think you should be terrible at this. Those of you that did what you were supposed to do should be incredibly proud of what you've achieved. Whether or not you achieved everything or whether or not you achieved just one thing, be proud of what you've achieved and be thankful for what you've been able to do. Because it's no small feat and it's no guarantee that you would have gotten any of this done without this planning. If you found this useful, do it again. You know yourself better now. You know what it's like for you to have a year of this goal planning and working towards something. And then you could implement different things that will work for you that probably maybe weren't good for me, or maybe I didn't recommend to you. And that's all I'll leave you with. I think these are incredibly important skills for those of you that want to achieve things and those of you that are interested in getting somewhere with something in life. And that's a very vague way of phrasing it, but this applies to almost everything in my opinion. So use these skills, shoot for an incredibly successful 2023 that's going to give you every single bit of satisfaction that you're looking to get from it. Like I tell you folks every single time, thank you for listening. I really do appreciate it. Small little love project of mine. If you found this useful, share it with people. Tell people about it. I mean, this is a labor of love for me. This is something that I do to instill something in somebody that maybe will pay off for you. Social media stuff's down below, LifeGeneralist. If you want to get a hold of me, let me know, and we'll talk next time.